Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back. In this video, we are looking at the NFL final look picks for tomorrow. I'm making this video right now Saturday night. It's almost 7 o'clock on the East Coast. So I'm going to try to run through it a little bit quickly as I was planning on making this video a little bit earlier, but some things got in the way. But nonetheless, if you guys enjoy the content, appreciate it if you hit the like button, subscribe if you haven't already. I wanted to just run down the kind of core plays that I'm looking at for tomorrow. We have 12 games, which is going to be fun, just having another bigger slate. Some pretty good games on the docket here. You have some bad teams squaring off, like Houston, Miami. That's going to be pretty good for fantasy. But quarterback position here, Josh Allen going up against the Jaguars. He's $8,200 if you think the Bills are going to put up the points on them, which they will, and hopefully they can sustain it throughout the game. Allen looks like a great play. He's been really consistent all year except for the first 2 weeks. Since then, he hasn't dropped under 20 fantasy points. He gives you good rushing upside. The only thing is that he's expensive. Typically, I like to spend down a little bit for my quarterback, not pay $8K plus. Some of the cheaper quarterbacks here, you have like Mahomes, who should hopefully bounce back. But the Chiefs, you never know what you're getting out of the Chiefs this year. He's a decent option if you wanted to pay up, but I probably like Lamar Jackson, just give you that rushing upside. 73 gets a good matchup against this poor Minnesota defense. They've been getting lit up on the ground, and we saw last week that how they just lost to the Cowboys team without Dak Prescott. Jalen Hurts is pretty affordable. He's 67. The Eagles should look to run the football once again this week. Didn't think they were going to run the football because they hadn't done it at all, except for last week against Detroit, where they just literally ran the football. Hurts only threw the ball 14 times. They ran it with Boston Scott, with Jordan Howard. They weren't running it with Miles Sanders for some reason. The whole thing is pretty frustrating. But if you wanted to play Hurts, I think he could be a good play, but he also might be a little bit risky just because I don't think they'll try to throw a lot in this game unless they get down, which they could. So if you think they'll get down and they have to throw, then I think Hurts is a good option. But I do expect them to just run the football early on, the first couple of quarters, just because of how bad the Chargers are against the ground. Maybe that benefits Hurts. He does take off and run, but the goal line touchdowns last week, Hurts did try to get into one, but he just went to the other two running backs. And then you have some good cheap quarterbacks that I like here. You have 5K for Tyrod Taylor making his return against Miami. Couldn't ask for a better matchup for him to just come back to. Bad defense. Should be a high-scoring type of game here. Just both defenses are really bad and both offenses are poor, but usually if the defense is that bad, offense will be able to move the football. Taylor finally coming back to action. He was awesome in the first week and a half that he played. Led them to an easy victory against the Jaguars, and then he had them up against Cleveland, and then he got hurt, unfortunately, but he's been super solid in those first couple of weeks. Looks like he's good to go. I haven't heard anything that, he's like hurting still or dealing with any sort of limitations. So 5K for Taylor. I think he looks like a good quarterback option if you wanted to go cheap. You also have the Packers rookie quarterback, Jordan Love, at 44. $600 difference. Good matchup for him against the Chiefs. You probably expect Matt LaFleur to try to run the football and give him some easy passes. For 600 more, I'd probably like to get to Taylor, but in another cash game or in other tournaments, I think you could look to Taylor. Could look to Jordan Love. The running back plays. McCaffrey is back. So we'll see. I don't know if he'll be limited. I think they could be on some sort of snap count just because he hasn't played since week 3, and they want to kind of preserve his health for the rest of the year. If you wanted to go to a safer play, it would be Austin Eckler, a guy that catches the ball out of the backfield, something that Dalvin Cook, who's right below him, hasn't really done this year. 10 targets last week, 7 the week before. He's getting you double-digit carries and potentially double-digit targets in a great matchup against Philly. They've been awful on the ground all year, especially for guys like Eckler that can contribute on both the ground and the passing game. And he's just such a beast in the red zone. Typically, like last week, he had a crazy touchdown where he pulled guys from the 5-yard line. Seems to always have a knack to just fall into the end zone. That's very good for fantasy. Dalvin Cook is there at 77. The targets haven't really been there at all. Most of these games, he has had a couple of over 6, but 2, and 3. Not typically what we expect from Dalvin Cook. It's a spot against a pretty tough defense against Baltimore. So I have to side with Eckler over Dalvin Cook. If you wanted to play both, I think you could. But you also have Aaron Jones, who will probably be a big part of the Packers offense this week, just with how much Matt LaFleur will probably just go to him without Aaron Rodgers, and the matchup is a good one for Jones to just run the football and try to keep the time of possession on their side. Other guys in 7K range, you have Joe Mixon and Zeke Elliott. They're both fine plays, neither one I'm going to just try to jam in there. 6K range, I like Nick Chubb, just matching up against the Bengals Still without Kareem Hunt, so you should get bulk of the work. Still not getting a lot of passing down work, so that's can be a little bit frustrating. Cordell Patterson, he's just gonna continue to take on a bigger role until Calvin Ridley comes back. He's just been getting more and more snaps as the year has gone on. He's kind of taken control of that backfield. They still split some work with Mike Davis, but Patterson gives you that touchdown upside, and Patterson gives you that a lot of catching and receiving yard upside. That Davis will get you a couple targets, but overall, it's like Patterson's had the way better fantasy. He hasn't dropped under 10 fantasy points since week 1. Something that you can't really say that about any other guy. So even though the matchup is tough against the Saints, just the fact that you're getting 2 running backs, both will contribute in the ground and the air, and both seem to have a knack to just fall into the end zone, and both have multiple touchdown upside as well. So I like his price tag at 63. You can go Josh Jacobs as well. I like Devontae Booker. Going up against his former team, sub 6K for a guy that also will get a ton of work just with how thin the Giants are, missing Saquon Barkley, and now they're still missing Sterling Shepard, who got hurt once again last week. So I expect them to continue utilizing Booker as they have been. He's getting a ton of touches in these games. 20, 16, 16, 19 for him the last 4 weeks. He's gotten 10 plus fantasy points. Gives you some upside to fall into the end zone as well. 28th ranked defense for the Raiders in terms of stopping the rush. I think Booker can capitalize on that. Then those are like my favorite running backs to kind of consider. You could hope to get lucky with Boston Scott and hope that he gets into the end zone multiple times again. Or maybe take a shot on Jordan Howard, who won't be popular at all. But I feel pretty good about just going with the running backs that I know will get me at least 15 touches with upside for close to 20. Wide receivers on this slate. The top end, you have Devontae Adams, you'll probably get him low owned this week just because he doesn't have Aaron Rodgers throwing him the football. The matchup is still a good one against the Chiefs, but personally, I kind of don't think I'll get to Adams. Just a little bit too risky for me without Love, especially for cash games. Deebo Samuel, 78, had another huge week. He's been awesome. 6 catches, only 9 targets, but for 171 yards. He fell inside the 5 2 times. Could have had 2 touchdowns there as well. Then you have like Diggs, who's been disappointing this year, but gets a great matchup against the Jaguars. I expect Diggs to possibly get you north of 20 fantasy points, at least 15 plus. Then Chase against Cleveland always seems to get some deep targets from his quarterback Joe Burrow. He has so much touchdown upside, and he has late breaking upside. So anybody like Chase is worth shots in tournaments. I probably like Diggs a little bit more than Chase, especially if people go to Chase just looking at the box scores and the fact that he's similarly priced. But Diggs has just such a great matchup against the Jaguars. But I don't even think you need to pay up at wide receiver if you don't want to. If you're playing Tyrod Taylor, you definitely want to pair him with Brandon Cooks. Cooks finally has a competent quarterback throwing him the football, even with like Davis Mills in there, who kind of wasn't great for most of his weeks that he started, except for one. Still getting you good amount of production. He had a 83-yard game and an 89-yard game where he had 13 targets. The first 2 weeks with Tyrod Taylor, he had 5 for 132. Then he had 9 catches, but that was half with Taylor, half with Mills. But overall, you expect Cooks to just get peppered with targets once again. He's at a very good price tag. He started off the season only in the 5K range. He's up to 61, but it's a lot different of a story. Usually everybody's kind of underpriced in week 1. So I like Cooks at his price tag. I think you can go Keenan Allen here. DJ Moore is affordable. Courtland Sutton in the 5K range. Those are all pretty strong plays. And then without Sterling Shepard, you just expect Tony and Galladay to get most of the work because they're also without Dante Pettis. Then another wide receiver that I'm looking at, that game looks pretty appealing. Houston and Miami, just with getting a cheap quarterback, pairing him with his number 1 wide receiver, it was only $6,100. And on the other side, they're going to be without Devontae Parker, who's on injured reserve once again, which will benefit the rookie Jalen Waddle, who's only $5,600. We've seen him be super productive in a lot of these games when they've been without Devontae Parker. 13 targets in 3 games this season. He's gotten 12 plus targets, and recently he's just been a lot more productive here. 12 targets last week against Buffalo, a tough defense, but only 4 catches, 29 yards. At least they were taking shots there, and the matchup is just so much different here. Great spot for Jalen Waddle and the entire Dolphins offense to put up some points, which they do with Waddle and Gesicki and Gaskin. Those would be like the core kind of group of guys that I would expect to have a lot of big plays this week. So I like Cooks, and I like bringing it back with Jalen Waddle, who's just very underpriced. And then the last guy I'll throw in here is going to be Hunter Renfrow from the Raiders. I don't see myself going very expensive or needing myself go super expensive at wide receiver. You're getting Renfrow, who it's been super solid all year. 8 targets, 8 targets, 8 targets, 6 targets at a 5-target game. Normally he's getting 5+ targets every single week. He hasn't dropped under 10 fantasy points, except for one time against Denver. But he's consistently getting a lot of looks from Derek Carr. We all know the Henry Ruggs unfortunate tragedy, which is going to make some of these other guys just kind of elevate and play more snaps and just get more targets. Renfrow will take a bump. Edwards will take a bump. You'll probably see Zay Jones be a factor in almost all 3 wide receiver sets. But give me Renfrow, who's pretty nicely priced at 48. The matchup is solid against the Giants, and he can be productive. And I wouldn't be shocked if he has close to, like 8 to 10 targets this week. So those are the 6 players I'm feeling. I'm kind of building out a cash kind of lineup. Maybe you can throw them in tournaments as well. But some of these guys will be popular. Like I expect Cooks to be popular. Waddle will be popular. I think Renfrow might not be super popular. Eckler will definitely be popular. Patterson might not be, depending. Just people are scared off by the matchup. And I don't really know about Taylor, if people are going to be scared to go to him on his first week back. But that's about it for the DraftKings side. FanDuel was very similar, but I will just post my picks over there. All right, FanDuel, pretty much the same type of deal here. Quarterback plays. Josh Allen is 9K. Lamar Jackson is 83. I'm always typically going to side with some of these running quarterbacks here. And then for the value quarterbacks, I mean, it's tough for me not to just go right back to Tyrod Taylor, who's sub 7K on FanDuel. He's only $6,900. Take a look at Jordan Love's price tag. He's 6K, so it's $900 difference, a little bit of a different story. But Taylor's also a guy that can run. I don't know how much he'll try to test his hamstring, but we all know he could run the football. You're probably not going to see Love try to take off and run. But Taylor at 69, and I'm going to pair him with Cooks right out of the gate because Cooks is very underpriced at 68. Maybe he's priced where he should be for if like Davis Mills were there, but for Taylor I think he's underpriced. Taylor should be locked in on Cooks for most of the game as long as he doesn't get hurt, which always can happen. That's always a risk of playing football. Expect those two to be a pretty solid combination. You're not even breaking the bank. And then other options at wide receiver, I think Waddle is 61. That's pretty ridiculously priced for Waddle, who gives you a lot of upside with the targets. They don't really take a lot of deep shots, but he gives you touchdown upside. We've seen Tua kind of look to Waddle a lot. He's kind of his first read on most of the time. He drops back. Him and Gesicki, they're just going to get a ton of the targets without Devontae Parker. So Waddle, Cooks, stick with the same kind of wide receivers that I have on DraftKings. Running back, give me $9,000 for Eckler. Just such a good spot for a guy that, like I mentioned, he's going to get you a ton of work on the ground and get you a lot of the work in the receiving game. He's a focal point in any of their red zone opportunities. So he has to be one of my favorite plays here. Kamara's in the mix as well at 94. But with them having Simeon at quarterback, I could see the Falcons just kind of stack the box a little bit. So you'll have to hope that Kamara gets a lot of the targets from Simeon. Other plays at running back, like Josh Jacobs is nicely priced at. He's an option at 72. Joe Mixon gives you some upside there. He's been catching a lot of passes recently. Patterson 7K. Don't mind going right back to him. Then you have Devontae Booker at only $6,300. A starter, he's in the similar price range as some backups like Kenyon Drake. Then you have Gaskin at 61, who could lose some touches. He has been losing some carries to like Ahmed, but he still gets you most of the work in the receiving game. But I'll go back to Patterson. It's kind of like sticking with Eckler and Patterson as my running backs. Patterson has shown just so much upside, and expect them to try to continue to force him the football. Just without Calvin Ridley, he can make some big plays. We haven't seen Mike Davis make a lot of big plays. And then Renfrow is super inexpensive on FanDuel. He's only $5,600. So going cheap at wide receiver this week. Cooks, Waddle, same game, stack them up, and then go with Renfrow in a great spot against the Giants. Just without Henry Ruggs there. More work for Renfrow, more work for the tight end, Waller, and then a little bit more work for Bryan Edwards. But sticking with the same core, feel pretty solid about it. Hopefully it pans out. Thank you for watching. Best of luck tomorrow, and I'll see you all next time.